My wife Jenny is the one who loves surprises. I have always hated them myself. Surprise parties, unexpected schedule changes, they make me uneasy. I'd rather know ahead of time what I'm going to be doing and then do it. I like anticipating things, looking forward to an event several days in advance, having the pleasure of imagining how it will be. Still, I love Jenny very much, and she loves surprises. Throughout our marriage, the best way for me to show her how much I love her has been to arrange some sort of surprise for her. Our 25th anniversary is coming up, and I was determined to give her the biggest and best surprise ever, which is how I've come to find myself sitting here in the bedroom of my house's darkness falls, looking at the unmade bed she and her lover have just climbed out of and wondering what the hell I'm going to do now. To understand Jenny, you have to know she is very beautiful, and I don't just mean pretty. I mean beautiful in a way that is hard to find. Unless you live in a big city like New York or Paris, you probably haven't seen anyone as beautiful as Jenny. Jenny is the kind of beautiful that makes people stop in their tracks and stare at her. I've seen cars stop in the middle of the street while the drivers lean out the window, forgetting where they were going. Her beauty is the kind that makes people rush back to work and tell their friends, "You won't believe the stunning woman I just saw." In short, we're not just talking about an attractive woman here. We're talking about someone who can change how you feel about everything after you see her. Jenny is about 5'8" inches tall, with a slim figure that is nicely balanced. She has honey blonde hair that she wears straight just past her shoulders. Her face is very regular, with a small straight nose and high cheekbones. Her skin is radiant even now in her mid-40s, and her blue eyes are stunning like the best sapphires you've ever seen. Of course, there are different kinds of beauty. Some women have a strong presence that draws you in right away. But Jenny's beauty is different. With Jenny, it felt like you were seeing nature at its finest. A kind of perfection you didn't know was possible. It was like looking at a beautiful painting in a museum. You wanted to be near her, to look at her more, and to imagine having her around. But the feeling wasn't strongly romantic. It was more dreamy and idealistic. Jenny has always been very beautiful, and she has lived a special life because of it. She stood out among her classmates from the beginning, getting both good and bad attention for her looks. Teachers often assumed the best about her, thinking that such beauty must come from a great person inside. Throughout elementary and middle school, Jenny usually got A's, even if her work didn't quite deserve them. High school was a bit different. There, the male teachers were often shy around Jenny. They couldn't treat her the same way they treated the other students. Her beauty made them nervous. She kept getting A's without having to try hard, and the college recommendation letters they wrote for her were full of praise. While Jenny had a few girlfriends, growing up, the boys her age acted like her high school teachers. But even worse, when Jenny was in the room, her female classmates struggled to flirt and joke like they usually did. Even the bravest boys could only manage to say hi, Jenny, as she walked past. Tim Kramer, the football team captain and the most popular boy in school, tried for weeks to gather the courage to ask Jenny to the movies. He even called her, but then got scared and said he was just calling to ask about math homework. After that, he gave up and settled up for dating the many average-looking girls in school who wanted to go out with him. It was mostly older men, though there were not many of them who could move past just staring at Jenny and actually talk to her. Jenny's first romance was with a 36-year-old man named Stephen, who was the younger brother of a neighbor. They met at a pool party the summer after her junior year. Like everyone else, he found Jenny amazing. However, Stephen was different. He was polished and had just come out of an 8-year marriage. He had moved to her small town in Pennsylvania after living in Chicago. Stephen knew how to talk to women, even someone as striking as Jenny. On the flip side, Jenny had little experience with men who could look beyond her beauty and be charming. So when Stephen showed interest, she found it easy to go out with him. Their relationship lasted almost a year, but ended just before Jenny graduated, as Stephen had to return to Chicago for work. Jenny's parents were worried about her dating a man much older than her. Her younger sister, Elizabeth, who was pretty too but not as stunning as Jenny, felt extremely jealous. But Stephen was kind and gentle, which made Jenny's family feel better about the relationship. It was a real relationship. Jenny truly cared for Stephen, and while he may not have had the same deep feelings, he still liked her a lot. They grew close after a month or two. Jenny was lucky because Stephen was a loving and patient partner. He truly cared for her, not just as a crush. He helped her understand their bond with kindness, keeping her away from the awkward moments many young adults face. Jenny learned about close relationships and how important emotional connection is. She was a warm and loving person, but never too passionate. She enjoyed being with Stephen and often preferred the closeness and affection he gave her over more intimate moments. This was understandable, as Jenny's outstanding beauty often caught the attention of those around her. She didn't really understand what it felt like to be unknown. She always felt people watching her, and it was something she just accepted as part of her life. I don't want to give the idea that Jenny was a selfish person. She was kind, happy, and loving with a great sense of humor, but her friendships weren't balanced. She received a lot, but didn't give as much back. Jenny was sad when Stephen moved away, but she felt better as her first year at Penn State began. Life at the university was a lot like high school. Her looks often shocked people. Her teachers gave her top grades, and many of her male classmates were too shy to talk to her. At a big school like Penn State, there were older men, including graduate students and teachers, who felt at ease talking to her. During her first years there, she had many admirers and a busy social life, though she didn't have serious relationships like she did with Stephen. I met her when we both joined the same sociology class in her second year. The class had 120 students divided into small groups of 6. I was lucky enough to be in her group. As time went by, I became not only fascinated by her beauty, but also impressed by her kindness and humor. Jenny noticed that 2 people in our group were having a tough time. She tried to help them, giving them compliments and encouragement to lift their spirits. She was fun to be around and often made everyone laugh with her playful jokes. It was no surprise that I began to see Jenny as someone special. I felt good about how I looked, but I knew I wasn't as attractive as Jenny. Still, I was determined to treat her well, like I would any girl I liked, hoping this would make me different from her other admirers. On the Tuesday before our sociology midterm, I called Jenny to ask her out for dinner that Friday after the test. To my delight, she said yes. I planned to pick her up at her dorm at 7:30, but when I got to her dorm room, her roommate told me Jenny wasn't there. I waited in the lounge until 8 p.m. When she still hadn't come back, I decided to leave. I didn't call her. I chose to wait and see what happened when I saw her in class on Monday. Since the class was big, I didn't notice her right away. After class, I walked out slowly, hoping she would find me. When she finally approached me with a warm smile, she apologized for being late. She told me she had been talking to a friend in the library and lost track of time. After she said she was sorry, she asked, "But why didn't you wait for me?" "Well, Jenny," I answered calmly, "after waiting for half an hour, I got really hungry. I didn't know when you would be back, so I went to eat dinner by myself." She looked surprised, as if she hadn't thought about how it felt for me or anyone else to wait so long. Finally, she said, "Of course, I really am sorry, Brad," and this time she sounded more genuine. As we walked, I stayed quiet, noticing out of the corner of my eye that she looked at me a few times. Then she asked, "Well, should we try again?" I replied, "That depends, Jenny." She looked confused and asked, "What do you mean?" "If you will be on time, I would love to take you to dinner. But if you will be late, I think I should make other plans." She looked annoyed for a moment, but then she smiled. "That sounds fair. How about Friday at 7:30 again?" "I promise I'll be ready." On Friday, Jenny was all set when I arrived, and we had a wonderful evening. For one thing, she looked great. She wore a simple skirt and a blouse with a warm sweater, but she still looked lovely. Even though I had seen her many times in our study group, I found it hard to see her as just a nice girl because she was so beautiful. What I liked even more was how well we got along. We talked easily about all sorts of things, shared funny stories from our past, laughed a lot, and felt really at ease with each other. Our dinner lasted a long time with dessert and 2 cups of coffee, and we didn't leave the restaurant until nearly 11, when the staff kindly suggested it was time to go. I was starting to really like Jenny, but I tried to stay calm and not act too excited like other guys I knew who were smitten by her. When we got to her door, I was ready for a handshake or a quick goodbye, but she looked at me and said, "Brad, thank you for dinner. I had a wonderful time." "Me too, Jenny. I haven't felt this comfortable with anyone in 3 years. You are really nice to be with." Seeing her happy face gave me the courage to lean in for a quick goodbye, but she kept my attention longer than I expected. It was so nice to be with her, and I held back a happy sigh as we parted. I was ready to say goodnight and walk away, but to my surprise, she said, "I would like to invite you over. Can you come for brunch on Sunday? I would love to." "What should I bring? How about something sweet for dessert?" "That sounds perfect. Let's say at noon, and bring your sociology books too. We can at least pretend to study," she laughed. As I walked back to my dorm, I felt happier than I had in a long time. Jenny seemed to really like me, and I was really into her too. Still, I remembered that I needed to be careful and not let anyone take advantage of me. After a few weeks, we were dating seriously. I was drawn to Jenny's looks, but even more to her smart mind, funny jokes, and kind heart. We decided to keep our relationship a secret from our study group. After a couple of weeks, our dates led to moments that felt closer. One night, I asked her directly if she wanted to spend the night with me. Since I was lucky to have my own dorm room, she smiled and said, "I was wondering when you would ask." When we got back to my room after a fun movie, I felt a bit nervous. It wasn't because I wasn't ready to spend time together. I had been in 2 serious relationships before, so I wasn't concerned about that. What made me nervous was thinking about what our relationship meant. We were sitting on the couch, enjoying each other's company, when Jenny looked at me in a way that said, "Let's take this further." "Jenny," I said, "can we talk for a minute?" She seemed surprised but nodded. "I'm really looking forward to this time together. But it's also an important moment for us, so I need to say something first." Jenny listened closely, still looking serious. "We haven't talked about what we mean to each other. So far, it's been fun and casual. I have loved every moment with you. But I don't know if we are just dating each other or seeing other people too. For me, being with you means a lot. It would mean that you are the only girl in my life while we are together. And I want to make sure you feel the same way about me." Jenny looked at me for a moment, then smiled. "I feel the same way, Brad. I did go out with a couple of other people since we have started dating, but those dates weren't fun. I don't even know why I did it, maybe just out of habit, but I want to be yours completely if you want me to." I smiled and gently lifted her to her high feet and into my arms. "I want you very much." Surprising her, I swept her up and carried her across the room to my bed. Spending time with Jenny that first night was as wonderful as our first date. I still admired her beauty, but what made me happiest was how comfortable we were together. We were both excited, but we took our time and enjoyed the moment. We really enjoyed the time we spent together until Jenny said softly, "Now, Brad." I reached into a drawer for something, but she touched my arm, smiled, and said, "You don't need that." I felt a rush of excitement as we shared a special moment. We liked being close, sometimes exchanging soft looks and warm smiles. As our relationship got deeper, we talked about our future without saying exactly what it would be. I planned to work in business after I graduated, probably back in Missouri where I grew up. Jenny wasn't sure what she wanted to do, but she hoped to find a job that involved helping people and would let her have some free time. I was already thinking about marrying Jenny, but it felt too early to bring it up since we still had a lot of college ahead of us. Our first big fight happened in April when we talked about summer vacation. I had an internship in St. Louis that could lead to a good job after I graduated. Jenny had promised her parents she would go back to her small town in Pennsylvania and work as a secretary at a law office for the summer. Could we stay together, even though we would be apart for 3 months? I wanted to, but Jenny wasn't sure. We talked it over. "I'm not saying I want to see anyone else, Brad," she told me. "But why should I stay home every night when I could go out with friends, see a movie, or go to a party? Isn't our relationship worth giving up a little fun?" I asked back, argued for a while, both getting more upset. Then Jenny said something that made me stop. "Okay, Brad, listen to me. If I promise to only go out with my female friends for movies or parties, would that be okay with you?" I quickly said yes. Well, she continued, Why can't I go out with male friends too if I promise it's just as friends? Just friends? She looked at me and I had to agree. Yes, Jenny, you're right, I sighed. I love you, and if you promise to be good, I will trust you. She smiled back at me. You can trust me, Brad. I love you too, and I promise not to do anything you wouldn't like. I'll act like you're always with me. Okay, but I need to say one more thing. You're not just any woman. You are so beautiful, and any guy would want to be with you. Jenny looked happy. She knew it, but she loved to hear it. So you really need to be careful, all right? Think about what you do and make sure no guy gets the wrong idea. She smiled at me again, almost playfully. Trust me, Brad. I've dealt with guys for a long time. It won't be a problem. Seeing I still looked a bit worried, she came over and sat next to me, wrapping her arm around me. I love you, Brad. Do you want me to say it again? I love you. I am yours, completely. All I had to do was hold her close and enjoy our time together. It was a perfect way to end our talk. The summer was tough, but it went by quickly. I worked hard in St. Louis, learning how things worked at a big food company that served hotels and restaurants. I managed to see Jenny twice, spending the weekends with her parents, who seemed to like me a lot. Between visits, we kept in touch with regular phone calls. I tried to surprise her with little things like sending a cute card that said, "Thinking of you," or mailing her a single Hershey's Kiss in a big box. One time I made her laugh by sending a fake letter from the IRS, saying she owed $90,000 in taxes. She found it very funny and showed it to her parents. The next fall, during my last year at Penn State, we made up for the summer apart. I had a small apartment off campus, and Jenny practically moved in with me so we could spend more time together. Our relationship grew stronger, and I felt sure she was the one I wanted to be with, forever. In April, I asked her to marry me. She was thrilled, but asked if we could wait for a year until she finished school. Our parents were very happy about our engagement. But first, we had to get through a year apart. Jenny finishing her senior year at Penn State, and me working in St. Louis. She came to visit me 3 times during school breaks, and I made trips to see her at least every other month. There was only one really tough moment that year. I arrived at Penn State early one Friday evening in February, about an hour before I planned. I rushed to Jenny's room, but her roommate told me she was out, likely at the cafe in the student center. When I entered the busy room, I scanned the crowd and spotted Jenny. She was sitting at a small table in the back, having coffee with a very good-looking guy in his early 30s. He seemed like he might be a professor. I almost went right over to her, but something in their body language held me back. I sensed a closeness between them that made me uneasy, so I chose to sit alone at a table 40 feet away. I wanted to see more without being noticed. There was nothing clearly wrong in their behavior. They were just talking and laughing while sipping their coffee, but their heads were really close together, and I felt like something was off. After a bit, the guy took Jenny's hands in his and talked to her sincerely. She laughed and pulled her hands back, but he kept speaking, looking straight into her eyes. A minute later, he reached for her hands again. This time, she let him hold her hands while he kept talking seriously. After a few more minutes, she checked her watch. She must have told him she needed to go. She pulled her hands away and stood up. I watched closely as she said goodbye, but there was no kiss or any closeness, and they didn't set up another time to meet. As Jenny walked to the door, she saw me sitting at the table, just watching her. Her smile faded and she hesitated for a moment. Then she gathered herself and rushed over to me, saying, "Hi, sweetie, you're early." I've always been good at staying calm when I'm upset. I think it goes back to when I was a kid. My father taught me how to box. He was a great amateur boxer and trained me for years. I boxed in some beginner Golden Gloves events, but I didn't keep it up after high school. My main sport was lacrosse, where I made the all-county team twice, even though I was a bit smaller than most players at about 5'9". Boxing taught me how to stay cool when things got tough. I learned never to panic or get too emotional. This skill has helped me a lot over the years, both in my personal life and in my work. When Jenny came closer, I felt anger and jealousy and wondered if she was being honest with me. But instead of getting upset, I just said, "Hello, Jenny," and let her hug me without standing up. She sat across from me and started talking quickly about how hard her week had been, how happy she was to see me and how I had arrived in town so early. It seemed like she didn't know that I had seen her with the guy, and she kept talking while trying to figure out how to deal with the situation. My silence made her uneasy. Finally, she stopped and asked, "Honey, are you okay?" I just looked at her and quietly said, "Jenny, maybe there's something you need to tell me." I had learned that it's better to hold back some feelings at first. I was angry and figured I'd let Jenny worry about what I knew instead of telling her right away. "Did you see me with that guy?" she asked, her face turning red. I didn't answer, just kept looking at her, and eventually she continued, "His name is Jamie Atherton. He's my professor in the English Lit class I'm taking. He suggested we grab coffee to talk about my last paper. I wrote an essay on Dickens that he liked a lot, and he wanted to help me expand it and think about publishing it. Honestly, Brad, that's all there was." I stayed quiet, and she looked more and more nervous. Finally, I asked, "Do you want to take a walk?" We zipped up our jackets and stepped outside into the cold. We headed towards Jenny's dorm instead of the hotel I usually stayed in when I visited. I didn't say a word or hold Jenny's arm. I walked quickly, making her work to keep up with me. As we got closer to her dorm, she said nervously, "Brad, why aren't you talking? I was really looking forward to seeing you." I simply replied, "I'll call you in the morning." "Jenny, maybe we can have breakfast and chat then. I need to think for a bit, and maybe you do too." I gave her a quick hug and turned to leave. I heard her say, "Brad," wait in a shaky voice, but she didn't come after me. That night was tough for me. I thought a lot and didn't sleep much. What did I really see? A guy showing interest in Jenny and her responding more than I liked. He didn't kiss her, and I didn't think they were intimate from the way they acted, but she didn't pull her hands away from his the second time, and it was clear she didn't mind his attention. I knew Jenny got a lot of attention from guys. I couldn't blame men for liking her or now for trying to get close while I wasn't there, but she was my fiancée, wearing my engagement ring. I wasn't happy she let that guy get too close. Jenny called me at 8 a.m. with a shaky voice, asking if we could have breakfast. When I met her in front of her dorm, she jumped into my arms and started to cry. "Brad, please talk to me. I know you're angry. I know I messed up, but really, it wasn't much. Please let me explain." She kept crying, and I held her, feeling a bit glad and relieved by her tears. I wanted her to feel sorry to tell me everything and for me to realize there really was nothing to worry about. "Okay, Jenny," I said softly, stroking her hair. I took out a tissue and wiped her wet cheeks. "Let's go sit down and eat, and we can talk." She held my arm tightly all the way to the restaurant and insisted on sitting next to me so she could hold on to me. Once we ordered, she began, "Brad, what I said last night is true. He is my professor, and he asked to talk to me about my essay. I've never gone anywhere with him outside of class before. But that's not the whole truth either. I knew he liked me. If it was some other student's essay, he wouldn't have asked her out for coffee. It just felt harmless to me. I was flattered by his attention, and I thought nothing would happen. We were in the student center, after all. I just finished my coffee while he talked a lot about my skills. Honestly, Brad, I knew I would see you in an hour, and this was just a way to keep busy." Near the end, she looked at me. I don't know if you noticed this, but he started saying how pretty I am, and he held my hands. I nodded, letting her know I had seen it. I pulled my hands back, but after a minute, he took them again, and I just let him. It felt too rude to pull away again. So I listened to him saying nice things, saying I was so lovely, inside and out, blah, blah, blah. Then I checked my watch and saw it was almost time for you to arrive, so I had a good reason to leave him. "I promise, honey, that's all that happened. I said goodbye and was going out the door when I saw you, and you looked so calm and quiet. It scared me. After hearing all that, I felt a lot better." I hugged Jenny gently. "I was upset before, Jen, but I'm feeling better now. Thank you for sharing everything." She looked very relieved, and I could see how scared she must have been. I get that it was just harmless flirting, and it didn't go very far, but it did go a bit too far. Do you agree? I looked at her seriously, and she bit her lip and nodded. "Yes, Brad, I shouldn't have let him hold my hands. I'm really sorry." With our minds clear, we enjoyed our breakfast, catching up on everything since we last met. I knew Jenny got a lot of attention from guys. She liked it and was used to it. but I needed her to understand that she had to be careful about how she acted, especially when I wasn't around. On our way back to my hotel after breakfast, I brought it up again. Jenny, do you remember our talk before last summer about you dating guys at home? You promised me that you'd always act like I was right there with you. She nodded, knowing what was coming. But I surprised her by saying, that was a good way to put it. She hugged me tightly right there on the sidewalk. She smiled and said, I understand, honey. I'm really sorry, and we won't need to talk about this again. Then stepping back to look at me, she grinned and said, can we go back to your room? I need to talk about something important. Our first years of being married were incredibly happy. We got married in her parents' backyard 2 weeks after Jenny's graduation, went on a 10-day honeymoon in Maui, thanks to my parents, and moved into a small house in the suburbs of St. Louis. I was doing well in my food services job. After a few months of happily setting up our home, Jenny decided to study for her realtor's license and sell houses. In just 6 months at a local real estate company, Jenny became their third best realtor. This did not surprise me. She was very pretty, and clients, especially men, wanted to work with her. When she suggested sellers lower their prices a bit, or told buyers to raise their offers by a few $1,000s, people listened. Soon she was showing and selling as many houses as anyone else in her office. Life with Jenny was joyful. She was still the same lively, funny, and loving person I had fell in love with. We had a nice group of friends, mostly from her job or mine, and we spent just enough time with them that being alone together felt special. Our relationship was sweet and fun. We felt very close and connected. For Jenny, the emotional bond was much more important than anything else. She was a bit old-fashioned, partly because of how she grew up. She never swore and felt uneasy when I did, so I tried to stop. She didn't like talking in detail, even when we were alone. The closest she came to being playful was one night on our honeymoon. We had enjoyed some champagne, and as I cuddled beside her, she giggled and said something silly out of the blue. In later years, she would sometimes whisper something funny to me, which made me smile. But it was not easy for her. She wasn't very open or willing to try new things. Even though she didn't often surprise me or take the lead, we still shared a close and loving bond. The little things she said and the way we looked at each other became very special to me. I quickly saw how much Jenny loved surprises, so I would sometimes bring her flowers just because, or stop by her office with a sweet treat. A few times she came home to find that I had cooked a nice dinner set up with candles and was dressed up to welcome her. For her birthday and our second year of marriage, I planned a surprise party. I invited her parents and some of her close friends from college. I sent her to the mall for an errand, and when she came back, everyone was waiting in the backyard. There were balloons, a happy birthday banner, and delicious food. She absolutely loved it. Surprising Jenny was something I did not just out of love, but also out of care for her happiness. She was used to getting a lot of attention from other people, and I didn't want her to feel ignored now that we were married. I knew that meeting many people through her real estate job was good for her, but I also wanted to make sure I gave her special care that she would notice. One funny thing about living with someone so popular is that you start to take it for granted. You don't notice it as much as the people who only see her now and then. I never completely stopped appreciating her, but sometimes I would look at her in amazement. How lucky was I to have this beautiful woman by my side? In our third year of marriage, we had Diana, our daughter, who made our lives much better. We both jumped into being parents despite the sleepless nights and worries about what to do. Jenny worked hard to get back to her old weight, and when Diana was 6 months old, Jenny began going back to her real estate job a few days each week, while a lovely neighbor watched Diana. When Diana turned 3, I quit my job, took out a bank loan, and started a small food business. I had learned a lot from my old job and felt sure I could work harder and do a better job. For the first 6 months, I worked very hard. I spent late nights in my office and took occasional trips, but things were starting to fall into place. I had gained some important clients, enough to keep the business running and help me grow it. I hired my close friend Terry from my old job to be my assistant manager. She was a divorced woman, a bit older than I was, and had become a good friend to both Jenny and me. She was smart and completely reliable. Everything seemed to be going well, and I felt like I was in a good place. But soon I found out how wrong I was. On a Thursday afternoon, I was in the kitchen of a restaurant at the Commonwealth Hotel talking about a possible partnership with the manager. The meeting had gone great, and I felt hopeful. As we said goodbye in the hotel lobby, he suddenly looked over my shoulder and said, "Wow, is that a beautiful woman?" I turned to see who he was looking at, and sure enough, it was a stunning woman. She was slim, wearing a nice suit, and to me, she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She was also my wife. She was walking arm in arm with a tall man who looked to be in his late 40s. After a moment, I recognized him. Marlon Anderson, the loan officer who had given me the loan to start my business. They were heading towards the elevators, chatting happily, and both the restaurant manager and I watched them quietly. They hadn't seen us. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped inside. As the doors closed, I noticed they were sharing a private moment. I felt sick, but I tried to keep calm. The restaurant manager said, "Wow, she was something." I replied, "Yes, she was really something." And then we said our goodbyes. Like I said, I usually stay calm and organized when things get tough, and this was definitely one of those times. I sat quietly on a bench outside the hotel for a few minutes, thinking about what to do next. It was around 2:45. I knew they would be in a hotel room together for at least an hour, and she would need to leave by 4:30 to pick up Diana from daycare. After thinking carefully, I made a plan. I had a quick lunch at a sandwich shop, then bought a nice bouquet of flowers and a white jacket that looked like a delivery boy's coat. When I returned to the hotel, I walked up to the desk and asked for Marlon Anderson's room. The clerk told me 617 right away. I took the elevator up to the 8th floor, left the flowers by someone's door, got rid of the jacket, and then walked down to the 6th floor. I waited around the corner in the hallway between 617 and the elevators so I could see the door to 617 without being spotted. As I stood there, I thought back to when I first met Anderson. I had taken my wife to the bank for a loan meeting, and she had impressed him a lot. He was a tall and very handsome senior loan officer with a friendly smile and smooth talk. He greeted me at his office door, using a charming line that I guessed he often said. When he saw Jenny, his eyes lit up with interest. That moment helped us get the loan since he seemed quite taken with her. In the months since then, I hadn't seen or heard from him until about 10 days ago when he called just to check on my business. As I waited in the 6th floor hallway, I thought he might have been looking for a chance to see my wife while I was away. I decided to call his home number using my cell phone. When a woman answered, I asked for Mr. Marlon Anderson. She said he was at the bank, so I decided to call back later. The hallway was quiet until about 4:10. I heard a door open and peeked around the corner. The door to 617 was slightly open, and I saw Jenny and Anderson coming out, both fully dressed. They smiled at each other as they walked towards the elevator. I stepped forward, waiting for them to notice me. Jenny looked up first and froze in shock. "Brad, what?" Wait, I can explain. This isn't what you think." "Jenny," I said softly, "please don't insult my intelligence." As I turned away, Anderson grabbed my shoulder and turned me back to face him. He had a look on his face that was a mix of embarrassment and a fake charm. "Brad," he said smoothly, "your wife is an unusually lovely woman. I'm sure you can see how something like this." I interrupted him. His fake tone made my choice clear. I confronted him and things got heated very quickly. I heard noise as I walked to the fire stairs. I took a cab and was home in no time. I knew I had a little while before Jenny would arrive, so I packed some clothes for a few days. I grabbed my laptop and some important work files. Then I got back into the cab and went to a Marriott close to my office. While on the way, I called Mrs. Anderson again. "Hello, Mrs. Anderson. I'm sorry to give you bad news. I just saw your husband coming out of room 617 at the Commonwealth Hotel with my wife. You can call the front desk, and they will confirm that he checked into that room." I heard her gasp as she took in what I said. I went on. "When you see your husband tonight, he might not look great. I'm afraid I broke his nose. He's going to have a wild story for you. But honestly, I saw him leaving that room with my wife, and I lost my temper. I'm really sorry to tell you this like this, but you should know about the man you're married to. Good luck." I hung up and turned off my phone, leaning back in the cab. I had one more task to do, but it would have to wait until the morning. In the hotel room, I unpacked, ordered a sandwich and 3 beers from room service, then lay on the bed. All the nervous energy I had felt for hours faded away, and soon I was crying. In that moment, I felt like every husband who suddenly learns bad news. I thought I was happily married. I was sure my wife loved me just as I loved her. I couldn't understand why she would cheat on me. What was wrong with me? What had I not given her? How had I failed her? Or was it not about me at all? Was I in love with someone who didn't care? I had stopped crying and was deep in thought, resting my chin in my hands when my dinner arrived. The beers didn't help. I just felt a little fuzzy, not any better. I called my friend Terry and asked her to come over for a drink. When she got there, I quickly told her everything. Terry looked truly shocked. She knew Jenny well, and there was only horror and disappointment on her face. That made me feel a bit better. At least I hadn't missed some signs that our friends had noticed. After listening to my whole story, she sighed. Wow, Brad, you're the last husband I would ever expect to hear something like this from. I'm so sorry. If anyone else had told me this, I wouldn't have believed it. After a moment, she asked, "What are you going to do?" Honestly, Terry, I have no idea. I guess I need to talk to her, but not for a couple of days. Let her feel the heat, right? I said with a sad smile. I'm so upset and hurt that I don't even know how to feel. I still love her and want to talk to her about this. How can I ever trust her again? We have a little girl, and I can't live without her. That's for sure. For her sake, I'll think about finding a way to fix this. Maybe I'm finally realizing my mistakes, huh? They say, don't marry a beautiful woman, and I married the most beautiful woman I know. I guess maybe I asked for this. That's not true, Brad. And you know it, Terry said firmly. I don't know why Jenny did this, but it's not because she's beautiful, and it's not because you're not a great husband. At least that's how I see it. It's just a mystery to me. You didn't deserve this. We talked for a few more hours, and then I told Terry it was time for her to go home and get some rest. What can I do for you? She asked. Mainly, I need to keep Jenny off my case. I'm sure she'll call me at work tomorrow. Can you tell Alice and Dawn to say I'm out of the office? I want to wait until I feel ready to see her. Are you coming in tomorrow? She asked me. Yes, I think I'm close to finishing a few tasks, and I need to make some phone calls and send letters. If I don't work, what will I do with myself? Yes, I'll be there. I just have one quick task to do first. The next morning I was at the bank when it opened at 8:30. I asked to see the head of business banking, Anderson's boss, and I was in Mr. Daniel Greenwood's office by 8:50, being firm and direct. I didn't waste time. Mr. Greenwood, I am here to make an official complaint against my loan officer, Marlon Anderson. He has been having an affair with my wife. I noticed Greenwood's eyes narrow, and he has taken information from me about my business and used it for his own gain. I am thinking about taking legal action against your bank, but I wanted to give you a chance to handle this first. He hesitated, saying my claim was serious and that he needed more details. I told him everything. Our meeting with Anderson about the loan, his strange call about my business trips, and that I had seen him with Jenny the day before. I also mentioned the injury to my nose briefly. By the time I left his office, I felt sure that Anderson would no longer work at the bank. Greenwood seemed ready to fire him if my story checked out. He also appeared willing to settle with me financially, and since the bank's insurance would cover it, that didn't seem to worry him at all. I would call my lawyer later today to see how much money he could get from the bank. From what Greenwood said, it could be close to $100,000. Anderson lost his job, his wife left him, and he found a new job at a bank far away. He could have accused me of hurting him, but I guess he didn't want to explain what he did in court. 8 months later, my lawyer gave me a check from the bank for $112,000. I put it right into Diana's college fund. Now, I had to face Jenny. I put it off until Sunday. She left many messages for me at work and on my phone, but I ignored them. Her messages were full of tears and apologies, along with worries but they just made me angrier. Her words of love and sorrow felt too late. I sat in my plane and hotel room thinking about everything. What did I not do as a husband? She had to know how much I loved and appreciated her. I had surprised her many times, But was that enough? Had our daily life made her feel alone, even with my efforts? I couldn't find a clear answer. Maybe there wasn't one. I knew I had been tempted a little, but I never acted on it. I didn't even buy another woman a drink or start a talk. My relationship with Jenny was special for many reasons. We were close and relaxed together, and she was the person I loved most and trusted the most. Or I used to trust her. On Sunday morning, I decided to go home and see Jenny. We would usually be at church, but I doubted she took Diana by herself. She would have to say why I wasn't there. I got to the house just after 11 a.m., when Diana would typically be sleeping. I quietly walked around the side of the house and looked through the kitchen window. Jenny sat at the table, a coffee cup in front of her, staring blankly. She looked exhausted and sad. I returned to the front door and walked in. When I entered the kitchen, she jumped up. It seemed like she wanted to run to me, but my expression must have changed her mind. With a soft voice and not daring to look at me, she began, "Brad, thank God you're here. I've been so worried, darling. I am so sorry for." I stopped her by raising my hand. "I'm not giving you custody of Diana." She gasped and stumbled back. I thought she might fall down. Instead, she sat back down in her chair and started to cry. I had done it on purpose, of course. Years ago, I had a boxing match against an older, better fighter who thought I would be easy to beat. Instead of starting the fight like usual, by moving carefully and using my jab to keep him back, I surprised everyone when the bell rang. I went right at him and threw a big punch over the top to the side of his head. It hit him hard, and at that moment, I could tell he lost his confidence. The fight was pretty much over. This made me think of a time with Jenny. I was really mad at her, so I threw the first punch in a way, but it made me sad to think of her like an enemy. How did we end up in such a bad place? I saw Jenny crying, and I felt a mix of love, sadness, and anger. I cared about her deeply, and I thought I had been a good husband. Was I wrong? If not, why had she acted this way? Finally, while still crying, she looked at me and asked, "Are we really at this point, Brad? Are you going to divorce me? Can't we just talk about it? Is it even worth it?" I replied. She cried even more. "Don't you know I love you?" She tried to say it through her sobs. "Let's just say I'm not so sure anymore." I said calmly, "What you did the other day didn't feel like something a loving wife would do." "I know I deserve that," she said. "I deserve anything you want to say to me. You have no idea how bad I feel, how ashamed I am. But please, Brad, just listen to me. Give me a chance." I sat quietly for a moment. I realized I couldn't end our marriage without hearing what she had to say. And honestly, I didn't want to end it. I wanted things to be like they were before. But deep down, I knew I could never have that again, and it frustrated me. As I thought, Jenny slowly calmed down and watched me. "Okay," I finally said, "why don't you go wash your face, and I'll get a cup of coffee. Then we can sit down and talk." "Thank you, Brad," she whispered. Then she stood up and left the room. When she came back, I said, "All right, here are the rules. You need to tell me the truth, and you must share everything. You have no idea how much I already know. And if you lie to me, our marriage is over. Honestly, it might be over anyway. I'm not sure yet. But if you won't be completely honest with me, it will end right here. I understand, Brad. I will tell you everything. There's really not that much to say. What happened next was one of the saddest half hours of my life. The story was so common, I felt like I was living a bad movie. As my new business was starting to succeed, I was working long hours and spending less time with Jenny and Diana. She was proud of me, but she also felt alone. Think about her past. She was a stunning woman who always got attention. About 2 months after we first met Marlon Anderson, he called Jenny. He knew about her real estate job and said he could help her find some new clients. For a couple of months, they spoke occasionally, mostly about work. He sent her some clients, which she appreciated. He was always polite and kind, never crossing any lines. After she sold a house for one of his clients, Anderson called to say congratulations. He suggested they go out to lunch to celebrate. Jenny had dealt with many men before, so she was cautious, but lunch at a restaurant downtown felt safe to her. Plus, she admitted to me that she liked him. He was nice, and although he was older, he was a good-looking man. At lunch, Anderson acted completely proper. He complimented Jenny a lot, saying nice things about her skills in real estate and her looks. He also brought up my work trips, asking if she felt lonely when I was away and making a comment about men's straying when they travel for work. By the time of this lunch, Anderson had already talked to me and knew I would be gone the next weekend. On Friday, he called Jenny, mentioned I would be away, and invited her to dinner on Saturday night, saying they could spend time together since both were alone. The dinner led to dancing, and Jenny's story made it clear he was very smooth. In a charming way, there was nothing out of line. Just a nice dinner full of compliments and reminders that I was not around. Jenny was open with me about two things. First, she said that she couldn't blame her actions on too much to drink. She was a bit tipsy but knew what she was doing. And second, she told me the connection with him mattered more than anything else. She is not a very openly romantic person. What she liked about being with Anderson was the charm and attention she felt, especially when she was missing that from me. She said if she could get all the attention without any trouble, she would want that. But she knows she's attractive, and she realizes that, for many men, romantic dinners can lead to expectations. As Jenny shared her story, I walked around the kitchen feeling a mix of emotions. It wasn't anything special, Brad. He wasn't as gentle as you are, but I could see he was really excited, and we spent time together that night. He wanted me to stay longer, but I had to go home for the babysitter. The second time was last Thursday when you saw us. He asked me to a long lunch, but I understood what he was really suggesting. I'm trying hard to be honest with you, Brad. The joy for me was the romance, the attention he gave me at lunch, the looks, and the compliments. This time, I only let it happen once. We took a break, and when he wanted to keep going, I told him I needed to pick up Diana. We were about to leave the hotel room when you saw us. How did you know we were there? I was with a client and saw you getting into the elevator. I said, trying to keep calm. My hands were tight, and I couldn't stop walking back and forth, but I didn't want to lose my cool. I knew that staying calm was the only way to understand how she felt. So what do you want now, Jenny? Do you love him? Oh my gosh, no, Brad, how could you think that? I held back my anger and asked, what do you want then? She looked directly at me. I want you back. I want our marriage back. I will do anything you say to make up for this terrible mistake. I want you to come home. Then she started crying again. I want to fix things, and I want you to forgive me and love me again. I felt both love and pain inside me. I walked over to her, pulled her close, and held her as she cried, resting her head on my shoulder. I waited until she calmed down. When she stopped shaking, I stepped back and looked into her eyes. I was about to say something when we both heard Diana cry. She had woken up. Without thinking, we shared a smile. Then I said, why don't you get our big girl and bring her in? We can give her lunch, and then we'll talk more. Eating lunch with Diana was a good break for both of us. She was so happy to see me. I hadn't been home in 3 days. We laughed and played while eating. After lunch, when Diana wanted to go outside to play, we let her watch a TV show for a while so Jenny and I could talk. When we were alone, I said, I don't know what will happen. Jenny, I know I still love you, but I also feel very angry and hurt. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She looked sad but didn't say anything. I continued, I'm willing to try for a couple of months. I really miss Diana, so I'll come home, but I'll sleep in the guest room. You can have the big bed to yourself, and each night you'll remember why you're alone in it. And we need to see a marriage counselor. Maybe that will help us understand what happened, and if there's enough left in our relationship to move forward. Jenny looked at me seriously and said, thank you, Brad. If it takes time for you to know what you want, just remember that I already know I want you and Diana in our happy home. I know I messed it up and I have to fix it. I will try my best. Her voice shook, but this time she didn't cry. I can't say that Barbara McDonald saved our marriage, but I'm not sure we would have made it without her. From the very start of our first session, she impressed me. A woman in her late 30s with dark hair and a sturdy build sat in front of us. She seemed smart and had a good sense of humor. From the start, it was clear she did not waste time on small talk. We explained why we were there. She asked us a few general questions. Then she said, I want to listen to both of you for a while. After about a month, I'll probably have more to say when I get a better idea of what the main issues are. We should start with 2 sessions a week. Later, we can meet less often if that feels right. Do you have any questions for me now? Actually, I have two, I replied. First, are you straight? She smiled and seemed amused. That's a personal question. Why do you want to know? Because my wife is very beautiful. Since I've known her, I've seen how her looks affect men. They often act differently because of her beauty. That's why I asked for a female counselor. And that's why I asked if you are straight. She nodded. I get it, Brad. Yes, I am straight. Thank you. Here's my other question. Several people who have been in counseling told me that in the end, no matter what happened, you both end up being 50% to blame. Is that true? She laughed, finding my question funny. There is some truth to that, but it is a bit of a stretch. In my experience, when both people are happy in a marriage, neither one strays. So since Jenny has been unfaithful, she said this clearly. It's fair to think that there are problems between you that you might not see. That doesn't mean the blame is split evenly, like you said. Being unfaithful is a serious mistake, and Jenny needs to take responsibility for it. But I might suggest things for you to think about regarding your own actions in the marriage. That sounds fair, I said. Thank you. Barbara. We worked with Barbara for 14 months. At first, our sessions were very emotional. We talked about our past, our marriage, and Jenny's affair. Jenny felt very guilty, and she didn't really understand why she got involved with Anderson. I was filled with anger and pain, and I didn't get why it happened either. More than anything, I wanted our old marriage back, the one full of love and trust. It took a long time for me to realize I could never have it again. It was like a vase that was smashed into a million pieces. It couldn't be fixed. It had to be left behind and replaced with something new. After a few weeks, Barbara started to help us see what she thought was the main issue in our marriage. We talked about it many times, and slowly it became clearer to both of us. I was lucky to have a good friend, Terry, who I talked to a lot about what was happening between Jenny and me. To put it simply, Jenny needed a lot of attention, especially from men. She had grown up getting a lot of it and felt like she really depended on it. There was a time in our marriage when she felt ignored, which made her look for attention elsewhere. I still cared for her deeply, but I was busy building my business, and I wasn't able to give her as much attention as before. Barbara made it clear that this wasn't about right or wrong on either side. Brad, no one can say you truly ignored Jenny. From what you both have shared, you were still loving and supportive. You were there for her when she needed to talk. She went on to explain that Jenny's need for attention and love was simply higher than average. People are different. Some love sweets, while others don't eat them at all. Some people need a lot of hugs and kind words, while others are fine with less touch or praise. There are those who like hearing, "I love you" all the time. And then there are others who feel loved without needing to hear it all the time. Barbara pointed out there were two main points to consider. First, Jenny's actions were hurtful, and she knows that. Jenny, you could have found many other ways to show Brad that you needed more love from him. Choosing to seek comfort outside your marriage was a poor decision, and both of you are feeling the effects of that. Brad, the second point is that Jenny has a higher need for love and attention. You care for her, and as time goes on in your anger lessons, I hope you remember that. I can't sum up everything we discussed over those 14 months, but the main thing was this: Jenny needs a lot of love and attention. Surprisingly, we didn't talk much about physical intimacy during our sessions with Barbara. She quickly understood that Jenny's affair didn't come from her being unhappy or wanting to try something new. It was more about what Anderson wanted, and Jenny gave it to him, but it wasn't truly satisfying for her. Knowing this helped me feel a bit better and let go of some of my anger. I also learned something important from Barbara about how I reacted to the affair. She told me, "Brad, you can't change what Jenny did, but you can decide how you react to it. What's done is done." She broke your trust in a big way. But you are the one who can choose if you want to stay angry forever or if you want to let it go. You can let your anger and hurt cover the love you clearly have for Jenny, or you can try to let that love guide what you do more than the anger. This was hard to accept. I realized that I was holding on to my anger because I couldn't face the fact that my old marriage was over. Some way being angry made me think that I could get back what I had lost. Once I understood this, I knew that accepting what had happened was my only sensible choice. In one of our early meetings, I insisted that Jenny tell me everything about her time with Anderson. To my surprise, Barbara stopped me. "Brad, I don't think that's a good idea. Jenny has told you what she did, and you know the main parts. I don't see how knowing the details will help either of you. It's more likely to make you even angrier and prolong your pain." I didn't believe her right away, but after thinking about it, I thought Barbara was probably right. So I didn't ask again. The fact that Jenny didn't find happiness in that relationship helped me, at least a little. There was another part of our meetings with Barbara that helped me. In many of our early sessions, I talked about how much Jenny's actions hurt me, and I cried a lot. This surprised Jenny because she had seldom seen me cry. Hearing me talk about my pain really affected her. Seeing me so hurt made her face what her actions had caused. For a bit over a month, I kept sleeping in the guest room. Then one night, without planning it, I got up, walked down the hall, and slipped into bed next to Jenny. The light was off, but she was still half awake. "Brad, oh honey, I stopped her. "It's okay, let's not talk." I was afraid she would say something that would make me angry again. So I reached for her and she moved closer, wrapping her arms around me. I felt a strange mix of pain and comfort. They fought for a while, but comfort won. We eventually fell asleep in each other's arms. Oddly, I didn't go back to our bedroom right away. I kept sleeping in the back guest room many nights, sometimes going to hold Jenny, sometimes staying away. She was smart enough not to pressure me. She was always happy when I got into bed with her, but she stayed quiet and patient on the nights I didn't. It felt like I was working through my own story of getting back together with all the ups and downs of my feelings. It was almost 3 months before we felt close again. By then, I was starting to feel more like myself and began to see our relationship in a more positive light. But I felt I shouldn't rush into getting close again. I worried that my hurt and anger would come up again, making things uncomfortable. When I thought I was ready, I planned a surprise for Jenny. She loved surprises from me. One Friday evening, she got home from work to find a note on the kitchen table. It said, "We're going out to dinner tonight. Please dress nicely and be ready by 8 p.m. Your date." I arranged for the babysitter to come at 7:30. At exactly 8 p.m., I rang the doorbell. I had brought my nice suit to work and changed there. I held flowers for Jenny, just like it was a real date. She opened the door with a big smile, looking beautiful. She wore a dress that showed off her slim figure and had styled her hair in a way I liked. Her eyes sparkled with joy. She might not have known everything I planned, but she felt it was a good sign. We had a wonderful dinner at the best Italian restaurant in St. Louis. We enjoyed just enough wine to make the evening even better. I knew she was curious about the surprise, but when she asked, I smiled and said, "You'll see." She understood she needed to be patient. When we got home, I paid the babysitter, and we peeked in on our sleeping daughter, Diana. Then I took a wrapped gift from the coat closet and gave it to Jenny. I said, "Please take this into our bathroom and get ready for bed. I'll meet you in the bedroom in 10 minutes. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she kissed me and rushed up the stairs. 10 minutes later, I waited for her in our room. Her golden hair was down over her shoulders, and she wore the lavender nightgown I had bought for her. By now, she had guessed what the rest of the surprise was. It might seem strange that I did all this for our first night together. It was as if I was the one who had done something wrong, trying so hard to make it up to her. Shouldn't I still be angry? Shouldn't I make her feel bad? The truth is, Barbara's words had made me think. I had a choice about how to deal with my anger. Letting it go felt like the right way to find my happiness again. I also realized that one of the worst things about being cheated on was how weak it made me feel. Planning this romantic night for Jenny and me was a positive step to help us move past the pain. I felt ready to take that step. I got out of bed and went to Jenny. I hugged her tight and said, "You look so beautiful in that nightgown. I hope you don't mind if I take my time." "Take all the time you need," she whispered. "I don't have any other plans for tonight." We lay together, enjoying the closeness of the moment. After such a long time and with everything that had happened, it felt like we were starting fresh, which made me excited. I gently touched her, feeling the warmth between us. She made soft sounds that showed she was happy. I lay back and held her close, enjoying our time together. It had been years since we had spent such nice time like this, and she seemed more lively. Her happy reactions encouraged me, and I felt a strong bond growing between us. As we lay there, I could feel the little happiness all around us. I knew we were bringing back something special that was worth keeping. Without looking up, Jenny said, "Oh, I've missed you so much." Her voice was soft and calm. "I missed you too," I replied, and I really meant it. At that moment, I felt love for her again, and all the anger faded away. We stayed like that for a few more minutes, our hands gently stroking each other's backs, enjoying the warmth and care we had for one another. It was a moment of real connection, free from past hurt. "What should we do now?" Jenny asked with a smile. I was surprised by how open she was and liked the playful way she spoke. I knew she was trying to make things better, and I was glad. "I'm just happy to be here with you," I answered. Without saying a word, we turned to face each other, wanting to enjoy this moment fully. As we moved, I felt a deep sense of belonging. It was a gentle way to reconnect, focused on being close and happy together. For several minutes, we enjoyed being close, feeling every little touch. Then I sat up to see her face. Her cheeks were shining, but she smiled at me. "I love you so much," she whispered. "I love you too, Jenny," I replied. In that moment, everything felt good, like we were finding our way back to each other. We both felt the warmth of our renewed love, and it was clear this was just the start of fixing things between us. We lay there, both happy, enjoying the quiet together. I pulled the blanket over us, and soon we were both asleep. I woke up to Jenny's smiling face in the smell of coffee. She was leaning over me, holding 2 cups. I looked at the clock. It was only 7:15. "I know it's early for a Saturday, but I hope we could have some time together before Diana wakes up," Jenny said. "Well," I said, smiling, "how about a few minutes of coffee and talking?" She nodded, sitting down next to me in bed and handing me a cup. We sat quietly, enjoying the coffee and each other's company, until we heard Diana stirring in her room, prompting us to get out of bed. That morning was a key moment in bringing our marriage back to life. I moved back into our bedroom for good, and for a while we felt closer than we had in a long time. Our relationship changed in a great way that seemed to last. For years after, we felt closer to each other, maybe because we both realized how close we came to losing one another. The next time we met with Barbara after that morning was funny. When we walked into her office, she looked at us and said, "I don't usually guess about things, but it's clear that you two have found your way back to each other, right?" We nodded and smiled big. Barbara smiled too, bigger than I had ever seen her smile. "I'm really happy for you." There were steps that led to this moment, and more will come in the future, but this one was very important. I'm glad it went well. Happy years and a shocking turn moving back into our bedroom didn't mean our problems were gone. Stopping our sessions with Barbara didn't fix everything either, but both were steps in a better direction. In the months and years after Jenny's mistake, I found my love for her was strong, even unbreakable. My anger came and went. Sometimes thinking of her with that guy, Anderson, made me really mad, and I had to walk around or take deep breaths to calm down. But over time, my anger lessened. The saying, "time heals all wounds," felt true. What took the longest to come back was my trust in her. I couldn't take her loyalty for granted, like I had for the first 7 years of our marriage. Now, if she was late coming home from work, if I couldn't see her for more than a few minutes at a party, or if she acted differently, my heart would race with worry. We talked about this a lot, we discussed it with Barbara, and kept talking. Jenny understood why I felt this way and knew she was the reason for my worries. She never blamed me for being jealous and always shared every detail about where she had been and why she was late. It probably took over 5 years for my worries to fade to a level where I could handle them better. But Jenny was not only loyal, she was also very patient and understanding. What helped me finally relax was that our life together was really happy, maybe even happier than before, because we were both trying harder. Jenny took every chance to show her love for me, in words through little acts, like making a special dinner or finding my favorite wine that was hard to get. My business kept growing. I got several large clients, and after a few years, the company was doing more than $5 million in business each year. Terry was really good at handling the daily work and managing the staff, which allowed me to focus on bringing in new clients. Jenny was also doing well with her real estate job. By the time Diana was 9, our family income had reached over $300,000, and we bought a big house in a nice area west of St. Louis. We applied to join one of the fancy country and golf clubs nearby. I had played some golf as a kid, and I enjoyed it. I hoped Jenny would like it too. Our final meeting for club membership was just like many events in our lives. We had met all the financial requirements, and the interview was for the stuck-up people who ran the club to see if we fit in socially. Well, one look at my wife was enough. They were all over her trying to be nice. If I had been acting silly, they probably wouldn't have noticed. We got accepted within a week. After that, the club, especially golf, became a bigger part of our lives. It turned out that Jenny loved to play, and after taking some lessons, she got good quickly. In a couple of years, both of us were scoring in the 80s most of the time. Our daughter Diana showed she had a talent for golf, too. She had played soccer when she was younger, but once she tried golf, she took it very seriously. She got good enough to win some local and state junior tournaments in her teens. With her great grades in high school, she even earned a golf scholarship to the University of North Carolina. Somehow, Jenny and I never had any more children after Diana. The years after the affair were hard, and then it felt too late. We didn't regret it too much, at least until Diana went off to UNC. Then we really felt the empty nest. The house felt very quiet, but there was a good side too. Jenny and I now had the time and money to travel and do what we wanted. During Diana's first year at college, I surprised Jenny with a winter trip to South America, a place we had never visited, and it was summer there. We liked trying out new golf courses, so one September we flew to England and played on some old famous courses in both England and Scotland. When we weren't on vacation, my wish to keep my business growing meant I had to travel more. Even 10 years after Jenny's affair, this made me nervous. I tried hard to show Jenny love and care before a trip, and to stay in touch with her while I was away. I had stopped sharing my fears, but I think she could still sense my worries. For our 20th wedding anniversary, while Diana was still in high school, we had a big surprise party. I honestly don't think Jenny was very surprised. I think she had an idea I was planning something special, and big anniversaries usually call for a celebration. But she acted surprised anyway. We had gathered a lot of family and some of our oldest friends who came from far away. We hosted everything at a nice rooftop restaurant in downtown St. Louis where we could see the beautiful city lights at night. Our 25th anniversary would be in June of Diana's senior year. Knowing that Jenny would be looking for surprises during that time, I decided over a year in advance to plan something special and to get it organized early. Jenny loved the ballet. We had traveled to New York and Chicago a few times to watch some great ballet performances. So I bought tickets for a Saturday night show in early December by the American Ballet Theater, which was touring in Chicago. I set up a whole weekend for us, a hotel, limousines, nice dinners, everything. I even worked with Diana in secret to pick out a new evening dress for Jenny. With years of practice and surprising my wife, I thought I had planned everything. A couple of weeks before the big weekend, I told Jenny I would be away on a business trip on December 9th. This was normal for me, so she didn't suspect anything. Then I had my friend Terry, who was also close to Jenny, called to invite her to the theater on Friday, December 9th. This was just a cover. I wanted to make sure Jenny would not make other plans that night. I asked Terry to pick Jenny up at our house around 6 p.m. They would have dinner, then go see the performance. I never really left that day. I just said I'd pretend goodbye to Jenny and then spent the day at work. My plan was to get home before she did, around 3 p.m., and have everything set up for her surprise by the time she got home from work at around 5 p.m. The first sign that something was wrong came around 2 that afternoon. Terry came into my office looking worried. "Brad, Jenny just called me to cancel for tonight. She said she's not feeling well and is going to rest at home." I thought for a moment. Well, Terry, it could be true, or she might have some other plans. Either way, it seems like my surprise is in trouble. Did she call you from home? I think so, but I'm not sure. I didn't hear any sounds from her office. Okay, thanks, Terry, I replied. I think I will go home quietly and see what's happening. Let me take a shower first. It will take me longer to get ready. I heard her go into the bathroom and close the door. Then the sound of water running started. I thought about what I had just heard. Jenny's tone in her call with George sounded cool, maybe even a bit distant, not at all warm. From what I had seen, it was clear she didn't enjoy the conversation like he did. His words to her made it sound like this was the first time they were together. They hadn't been seeing each other long. I knew what I needed to do, so I waited quietly in the guest room, listening as they got dressed. From their talk, it was clear they had lunch that day, and he had convinced Jenny to come back here afterward. I remembered that Jenny had called Terry at 2 p.m. to cancel their plans for the theater, so she probably did not plan to meet Atherton until after lunch. He must have been very charming. Then, it was also clear from their conversation that this was their first time together. I could tell Jenny felt bad about it, though she didn't let Atherton see that. She seemed ready to go out to a nice dinner with him. I waited until I heard them go down the stairs, and then I heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of Atherton's car driving away. I figured they would come back after dinner, or maybe he would drop her off somewhere. In any case, he had a wife at home, so he wouldn't take Jenny back there, so I had a couple of hours. Oddly, I was hungry, so I quickly made a sandwich, ate it, and cleaned the kitchen. Then I went to my computer, downloaded some photos, and did some digital editing. I picked 6 photos that clearly showed Atherton with someone who was not his wife. I carefully blurred Jenny's face and part of her hair so she wouldn't be recognized. Then I emailed the 6 photos to my work computer, printed 1 copy of each, and deleted them all from my home computer and camera. I had 2 more things to do. I called Terry, told her the short version of the bad news, and asked if she was free for the weekend. We don't have to go to the ballet, but I have a ride to Chicago, a hotel suite, and a restaurant reservation. I really don't want to stay here this weekend, Terry, and I would appreciate it if you could come with me. Of course, Brad, I'd like that. Let's try to have some fun, even with everything going on. I'll pack a bag, and you can pick me up whenever you're ready. And Brad, I'm so sorry. Thanks, Terry. I'll see you soon. I sat back down at the computer and wrote a letter to Jenny, explaining in detail what I had planned for the surprise weekend. I wanted her to see what she missed by being with that man. Dear Jenny, this year is our 25th wedding anniversary. I wanted to show my love for you by doing something special. I knew I could never surprise you right before our actual anniversary, so I had planned a lovely getaway for us this weekend. Here's what we would have done. I would surprise you today at around 5 p.m. when you came home from work with flowers and a bottle of sparkling drink. At 6 p.m., a fancy car would pick us up and take us to the airport. I packed your things for the weekend already. We would fly to Chicago on a private plane that a friend and client was lending us for the weekend. In Chicago, another fancy car would take us to the top of the Mark Hotel, where I reserved a special room for us. Waiting in our room would be more sparkling drink, and a late dinner I ordered for us. Tomorrow we could do anything you wanted. Visit a museum, do some early Christmas shopping, walk around the city, or just relax in our room. We had a dinner booking for tomorrow at Chez Louise, the best French restaurant in Chicago. After dinner, we had 2 great seats for the American Ballet Theater. To make sure you had something nice to wear, Diana and I picked out a beautiful evening dress for you. It's hanging in the closet in our room. I was also bringing a pretty sapphire necklace and matching earrings I bought just for you to wear with the dress. On Sunday, we plan to have a nice brunch, maybe take a walk, and then fly back home in the early evening. It would have been a special time for us, a way for me to show you how much I love you and appreciate you, a way for me to thank you for 25 happy years and to look forward to 25 more. I'm so sorry this won't happen. Your loving husband, Brad. I wrote it with all my love. I didn't want to say mean things to her. I thought she would be harder on herself than I could ever be. I felt much more sadness than anger. I was just so sad. I missed the happy future with Jenny that I was sure of just hours ago. I also felt the loss of trust in her, which I had fought hard to rebuild over the years. And I felt sad for Diana, who would have to understand why her parents' marriage was suddenly ending. Once I was ready, I turned off all the lights and waited for Jenny to come home with name Atherton. I didn't want that man to be alone with my wife again, but I wanted to see if it went that far before I stepped in. When I heard them arrive, I quietly moved to a corner of the kitchen where I could see the front door and the hall. As they came in, I saw Atherton holding Jenny's arm and smiling, finishing a story he had been telling her. She turned to him and said, "George, thank you for a lovely dinner and lunch." He laughed and replied, "And for the lovely time in between. How about I make us each a drink, and we relax for a while? Angela thinks I'm at a meeting. She won't expect me home until at least 11. No, George, thanks. I'm feeling a bit tired. Let's just say good night," Jenny said with a small smile, but her face looked tense. He wasn't ready to give up. "Jenny, you are the most amazing woman I know. This afternoon with you was unforgettable. I wish I could hold you close again. Thank you, George, but I need some time to think. I think we should just say good night." She was firm and strong, just like I knew her to be. Why hadn't she made this clear a few hours ago? He sighed. "Okay, I will look forward to seeing you again." I watched as Jenny closed the door behind him. Her expression changed, and she looked worn out and sad. "Wow," she said quietly to herself, shaking her head. She took off her coat and started up the stairs. I didn't want to startle her, so I waited until she went up a bit before I turned on the light. I heard her turn around, and after a moment I said softly, "Jenny, it's me." She still couldn't see me well, so I walked out of the kitchen and came to the bottom of the stairs. Her face was pale, and when she tried to talk, all she managed was "Brad." She looked frozen in place. I walked up the stairs, took her hand, and gently led her back to the living room. I sat her on the couch and took a chair across from her. I knew I was about to make her sad, just like she made me feel, and I felt sorrow for both of us. I waited until she spoke slowly, her voice filled with sadness. "I thought you were out of town. I wanted to surprise you for our 25th anniversary. I planned a weekend trip for us. Here are all the details," I said, handing her an envelope I had prepared. She didn't open it. Instead, she held it in silence, looking at me with blank eyes. "When did you get here?" "I've been here for a while," I told her softly. After a moment I added, "We need to talk, but I'll leave now. I'll call you in a few days, okay?" Without waiting for her reply, I walked to the door. Glancing back, I saw tears on her cheeks, and she looked like she had lost something important. Just before I stepped out, she said, "Brad, I'm so sorry. I know, Jenny, I'm sorry too." At that moment, I wasn't mad at Jenny, but I was very upset with George Atherton. It took me just 10 minutes to drive to his house. When I rang the bell, his wife Angela answered. "Hi, Brad, great to see you. This is a nice surprise." "Hi, Angela, I'm sorry to drop in, but is George here? I need to see him. It's urgent. He just got back a few minutes ago. Let me get him. Come on in." As I waited in their hallway, George came out from the back of the house. He looked surprised when he saw me, but after a moment he smiled and came closer. "Brad, great to see you. How are you? How's your lovely wife?" I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I stepped in front of him. He looked shocked. Angela came rushing back into the room. "Brad, what's happening? Why did you hit George?" "Because, Angela, I saw your husband cheating on my wife. I handed her 6 photos. She looked at a few and gasped, 'That jerk.'" I sat down on the sofa calmly. "Angela, why don't you get your husband a glass of water? He seems like he needs it. Then I need to talk to both of you for a minute." Still looking stunned, she did what I asked. A few minutes later, George was finally sitting in a chair. He didn't look my way. Angela was across from him, looking very angry. "Okay, George, here's the deal. You showed today that you're not fit for your role, right? So tonight, you will call the pastor and the board of governors to resign. You can say it's for personal or health reasons. Whatever you want. I don't care. But you must do it. If you haven't done it by noon tomorrow, I will send copies of those photos to everyone on the board of governors. I'm sure they will be worried about your actions. And one more thing, don't even think about bringing Jenny's name into this. If you do, I will come back." He didn't even try to argue. He quickly agreed, still not looking at me. "Okay, Brad, I'll do it. Will you promise not to send the photos? You resign and I keep the photos. But it's a shame. More people won't know about the other side of George Atherton." I turned to his wife. "I'm sorry, Angela, really. Maybe I shouldn't have put you through this. But I thought you deserved to know the truth about him." She nodded sadly at me. "No need to apologize, Brad. I've known for a long time he has been unfaithful in the church. It's It's actually nice to have proof. Without saying more, I walked back to my car. Terry and I tried to enjoy our weekend in Chicago. I felt bad for her since I was so sad, which didn't make it easy to have fun. We ate good food, enjoyed the Christmas lights while shopping, and skipped the ballet for a fun musical. I did my best to keep things light. On the way to Chicago, I told her everything I had seen, both of us remembering sadly that 18 years ago, I had gone through the same thing when Jenny cheated on me. As before, she listened with love and concern, holding my hand gently when I cried. The toughest part was over when we got to the hotel, and we could relax and enjoy our dinner along with the beautiful view. Over the years, I had often thought about Terry. At 53, she was 5 years older than me, and still very pretty. I sometimes wondered what it would be like if she were my partner instead of my best friend. I found her attractive, and I thought she might feel the same about me. But we never talked about it, and that felt right. That night in the hotel suite, something a bit awkward happened. Terry walked into the bedroom and came out holding a lovely nightgown I had left there for Jenny. "Wow, Brad, this could have caused a big misunderstanding," she joked. I laughed, but then thought about offering it to her. She read my mind and smiled sadly. "No, Brad, I don't think that's a good idea. I care about you more than any other man, definitely more than my ex-husband, but we're better off as just friends. And tonight, neither of us would feel right about me giving you that kind of comfort." I went up to her smiling and kissed her on the forehead. "Thank you, Terry. You are my best friend. One reason I love you is that you're much smarter than I am." We hugged tightly and then returned to our coffee and dessert. When I got back to St. Louis, I found a few short messages from Jenny. In a sad, tired voice, she said she was ready to talk whenever I was. I called her on Sunday night and asked to meet at home the next day after work. She agreed, but then asked, "Did you go to Chicago after all?" "Yes, I went with Terry." "We had an okay time, but it wasn't the same, Jenny." There was a long pause. I could hear her softly crying. I waited for a moment and then said, "I'll see you tomorrow, sweetheart," and hung up. I didn't feel angry. I knew I was expected to be upset, furious, even ready to confront my not unfaithful wife. For the second time, she had messed up our happy marriage. I should be angry, right? But my feelings didn't match those thoughts. What I felt was mostly sadness for both Jenny and me. I didn't understand why Jenny had been unfaithful or why she let it happen. I thought it might be about wanting attention and feeling loved, but I knew she was now feeling deep regret, blaming herself, and rightly so, for breaking apart our happy life. Given the hurt she was experiencing, I didn't want to add to it with my own anger. On Monday, I called Barbara McDonald and asked to meet her. She sounded surprised to hear from me after a long time, but she said she would prefer to see Jenny and me together. "I really need to talk to you alone." I said, "Jenny has cheated on me again." She took a deep breath. "Brad, I'm really sorry to hear that." We set up a time to talk later in the week. Jenny greeted me at the door on Monday night. She looked worn out, almost beautiful in her tiredness. Her face was pale and there were dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't taken much time to get ready, and it seemed she hadn't gone to work that day. I felt confused about my emotions. Should I be happy? Should I think, "Good, you deserve this"? Or should I feel pity for my wife who is hurting? Yes, she created this situation, but it still made me sad to see her so down. Or maybe I should just think about how I'm losing a marriage that meant everything to me. We sat together in the living room. Jenny looked like she wanted to talk. She stared ahead and said, "You don't have to worry about tears tonight, Brad." I'm all cried out. Then she was quiet for a moment. Suddenly she spoke again. "I've been such a fool, Brad, an absolute idiot." Her honesty surprised me. I've thought about this again and again. Why did I do this with George Atherton, that self-important politician? Did you know, by the way, that many ladies at church think he's so great? Everyone knows he has a bad reputation. I heard some gossip about how charming he is. What nonsense! Her voice went from dull to lively, but then it quieted down again. "And the note you left for me about the weekend you planned?" Reading it nearly broke my heart. Brad, I almost cried forever. I guess that's what you wanted. What a wonderful surprise it would have been. If only I could go back and change what happened on Friday. I've thought about that a million times this weekend. She felt quiet again. I waited a moment and then softly asked, "Can you share what happened with you and George?" She sighed. "He's been around for months, Brad. I see him a lot at church meetings, and he has been paying a lot of attention to me. I should have seen this coming. I just don't know why I didn't say no weeks ago. We had lunch planned on Friday, but honestly, there were supposed to be 3 other people there for a working lunch. But when I got to the restaurant, it was just George at a small table for 2 in the corner. He told me the others canceled, so we needed to reschedule. He hoped I wouldn't mind having lunch with him instead." She frowned. "I keep going over it in my mind, Brad. We had lunch and he was charming. I have to admit, turning 47 last summer made me feel sad. It made me feel old. I know I still look good, but I don't look like I did at 27. Anyway, he brought me back here after lunch and asked if I'd join him for dinner that night at a nice quiet place outside of town that he knew about, and I said yes. I just don't understand, Brad." She looked at me really confused. "I called Terry to cancel our plans for the theater on Friday, and I let him drive me home, and it was terrible. He was too forward, and it made me feel awful, like I was letting someone take advantage of me. I couldn't wait to take a shower afterwards. Then I went to dinner with him because I didn't have an easy way to get out of it. You were away, and I didn't want to argue with him. So I thought I'd just have dinner and then get rid of him. When we got back here, I did. I'm not sure how much you saw." She looked at me. "I was here for a while, honey. I saw the end of your time with George." Her face turned bright red and she looked down. "I could tell you weren't having a good time, that it was not a nice experience for you." I wanted to say more, but she held up her hand to stop me. She stood up from the couch, walked to me, and knelt down looking serious as she gazed into my eyes. "Brad, it may not matter now, but I have to say this. I am sorry. This was the worst, most shameful thing I have ever done. Even if you didn't know about it, it would still be bad enough. I would have spent the whole weekend feeling terrible. But the fact that you were here, that you know what I did." She stopped, tears falling. I said I was all cried out. She said, trying to smile. "But I guess I was wrong. The fact that I broke your trust again, after all the work we've both done." She paused, still crying, but kept looking up at me. "Brad, are we finished? Have I ruined our marriage for good?" She was shaking. "I don't know, Jenny. I've just been feeling so sad all weekend. Not really angry, just sad. I wanted to grow old with you and be best friends for the next 30 years. Or however long we have left. And now I don't know if that's still possible. I just don't know." She started to cry hard, kneeling at my feet with her head down. I fought the urge to pull her into a comforting hug. I just sat there, dry-eyed, but wishing I could cry too. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the kitchen, calmer, sipping coffee. It was dinner time, but neither of us felt hungry. "Do you want me to move out, Brad?" Jenny asked softly, tired and without energy. "No, Jenny, not for now. I have a hotel room for a few days. I've been thinking about finding a nice apartment downtown near the office, just until we figure out what to do next. Diana will be home for Christmas break on Saturday," she said, her voice shaking. "I know. I've been thinking about that too. We'll just have to see what happens with Christmas." "And I'm going to meet Barbara McDonald on Wednesday," I added. She nodded and said she thought that was a good idea. After 5 minutes of silence, I stood up and said I should go. She walked to the door with me, and before I opened it, she spoke. "Brad, I'm not sure I should say this." She looked at me very seriously. "I love you, more than anything." "I know, Jenny." I leaned down to kiss her cheek, fighting the urge to hug her tightly, and then I stepped outside. My meeting with Barbara was pretty heavy. She listened to me with kindness and gave me time when I cried. I shared everything, my surprise weekend plan and all that happened at the house. After I finished, she waited a moment before speaking. "Brad, I'm struck by how sad you are, but you seem to have little anger towards Jenny. Why do you think that is? I don't know. I've noticed that too. It seems clear to me that Jenny didn't mean to hurt me, that she loves me, and that she's just going through a tough time. Unless I'm just being foolish, she really loves me and wants us to be together as much as I want that. As I've said, what she was looking for with Atherton wasn't really bad. She just wanted a bit of kindness and support. I guess what bothers me is that she could have gotten that from me if she had just asked." "Yes," Barbara replied with a small smile. "Sometimes when it comes from a spouse, it doesn't feel quite the same. She already knows you love her. Most of us need some kind of words from other people sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. The issue is that for the second time, Jenny crossed the line. Yes, I said, but I have to face the results just like she does. Now I'm getting frustrated. She made a mistake. But now we're both facing the end of our marriage. Brad, she hurt you badly again, and you have every right to feel upset. But remember, you also have a choice about how to deal with those feelings. Let me ask you this. Forget about what Jenny might want. What do you want now? I thought for a moment. I'm not sure. But the only happy future I see is one with Jenny in it. I have looked forward to us growing old together, traveling and doing things we both love, sharing our lives even if we don't do it as often, and having grandchildren. Well, she said softly, there's no reason you can't have that if you want it. I scoffed. But if I can't trust her, how can I trust her? Now? She's made this mistake again after all our hard work. Brad, in the past 18 years, how many men do you think have shown interest in Jenny? I stared at her, hundreds for sure. And how many of those has she been involved with? I understood her point. Just one, I guess. How can I be sure of that anymore? Barbara said, let's say it's just the one time. Doesn't that mean Jenny has tried to stay loyal to you? I sat and thought about what she said. Does that mean I'm just supposed to say it's okay when she does this? Like it was no big deal? No, it doesn't mean that. But you might want to think about how her overall love and faithfulness in your marriage fits into this. Look, Brad, she continued, cheating is a serious problem. It's a terrible thing to do. I've seen it break many marriages. But I have also seen how strong your bond is and how much you both care for each other. An idea started to form in my mind. Barbara, could I tell Jenny that I want to save our marriage? But she needs to show me she's serious about it. Not as a way to punish her, but to prove she really wants to make it work? I think that's fair, she said. It will depend on the details. What do you have in mind? I leaned forward and explained my idea. She listened and gave her thoughts, and we talked about it for the rest of our meeting. On Thursday night, I called Diana at school. I didn't want to disturb her until her finals were over, but I wanted her to know I had moved out. I didn't want her to be shocked when she got home. We first talked about school, her exams, and her plans for the golf team next spring, plus some Christmas plans. Then I said, Diana, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your mom and I have separated for now. I know Mom called me a couple of nights ago. She was really upset. It was hard to listen to. She wouldn't tell me much, just that it was all her fault. What's going on? You don't need to worry about the details. We're just going through a tough time. It happens to many couples. It doesn't mean we're getting a divorce, just that we need to sort some things out. I tried to sound more sure than I felt. By the way, I added, we won't both be at the airport on Saturday to pick you up. I'll let Mom do it, and I'll call you on Sunday so we can meet up, okay? We talked for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. I felt relieved that Jenny had called her first. And I was also glad that if our marriage was really over, Diana was a college senior and not a little kid. The Christmas season was tough for us. Jenny and I met 2 more times to talk things over. Our meetings were calm and not angry, but they felt pretty heavy. I was sure that Atherton was really her only affair from long ago. I didn't trust her much, but her voice and body language made me believe she was being honest. She understood why I asked the question, and she didn't hold it against me. Our conversation showed me that she cared for me a lot. She wanted us to stay married. But deep down, she didn't believe we would. She seemed more sure than I was that I would never be able to forgive her for what she had done before. I met Barbara McDonald 2 more times to talk about my ideas. After those meetings, I felt ready to move forward. Jenny and I didn't want to make Diana feel sad during Christmas, so we decided to share the holiday with Diana, spending Christmas Eve with me in my hotel. I had decided to wait on finding a new place until after the holidays. Diana had a few more questions about our marriage, but I didn't want to involve her in it. I also didn't want to mention her mother's past actions. Between Christmas and New Year's, Diana and I went skiing for a few days, which lifted my spirits. The time away, the skiing, and just being with my daughter were exactly what I needed. When we returned, I called Jenny and asked if we could meet on January 4th after Diana went back to school. She suggested making dinner for us, and I thought that was a nice idea. Can this marriage be saved? Dinner with Jenny was tougher than I had expected. We had a lot to talk about regarding Diana and how well she was doing and her plans for after graduation. But once we finished that, it was hard to find another topic. So we sat mostly in silence, even though the food was great. Jenny had clearly put in a lot of effort. She had chosen her outfit carefully, and she looked stunning. After dinner, I suggested we take our coffee into the living room. I didn't want to wait any longer. Jenny, I think it's time we discuss our situation. Can you tell me what you want to happen? She looked surprised. Do you really need to ask me? Brad? Just tell me, I said. Pretend I don't know. She took her time, then said, I want our marriage to continue, Brad. I hope you can forgive me, and we can live together again. And I want you to love me. Tears filled her eyes. All I want is for you to love me like you used to. I love you. She paused as her emotions took over. But how can that happen? She sobbed. How can you forget what I did before? Honestly, Brad, I wouldn't know how to live with you if the roles were reversed. I've thought about how to make things right, but I just can't. I can never fix this. As she cried, hiding her face in her hands, I simply watched her. If feeling sorry for what happened was part of the plan, then I was seeing a lot of it. I went over to the couch and gave her a tissue. I waited as she took a moment to calm down and dry her tears. Jenny, if we both want the same thing, we should be able to find a way to make it happen. She looked at me with watery eyes. But how? Even if you take me back, how can you ever trust me again? How can you look at me without thinking about what I did? I've been thinking about this a lot, and I have an idea. Do you want me back enough to work for it? To show me that I really matter to you? Of course, Brad. Jenny, don't say of course so fast. What if I asked you to do something very hard? What if I said, do this hard thing and I will trust you again? It's actually something very difficult. She had stopped crying and was calm, looking seriously at me. I can't guess what you mean, Brad. But I know I owe you and I have to make up for what I did. Please just tell me what you mean. I took a deep breath. Jenny, I think we should take a break for a year. During that year, I don't want you to go to parties or date anyone. I also don't want you to meet any man alone. None. If you need to have lunch with a client, he should bring his wife. Or you can take a coworker with you. I know how much you like the attention and praise from men. It seems that has caused us trouble before, so I'm asking you to live without that for a whole year. If you can do this, I'll feel like I can trust you again. I sat quietly, watching her think. So I can go out with women friends but not men, no matter what. I nodded. And no parties at all? I nodded again and added, not any of those big charity events or dances with lots of people. She thought some more. Brad, she said, a bit unsure. What would you be doing during that year? I'd be living my life, I replied. Working, traveling, probably dating if I meet someone I like. I promise it won't get serious. If at the end of this year you keep your promise, I'll be ready for you. But I won't stop living like I am asking you to, because I'm not the one who broke our trust. Her lips shook as she looked at me. I don't know what scares me more, being alone without social contact or thinking about you dating someone else. She started to cry again. I hurt you twice, Brad, and I'm so jealous of you with another woman that it's too much to bear. I held her close, saying nothing, letting her calm down. Eventually, she stood up and began to walk around the room. I'll do it, Brad. It sounds really hard, but that's just clearly the point. And you should know, I am scared. I don't know what it will be like without people paying attention to me. But I'm more worried about you being with someone else, someone who will make you forget me. She was trying hard not to cry again. Listen, she said, can we stay in touch? Maybe see each other every few weeks? It would help me a lot if I could see with my own eyes that you are still in my life. Of course, I said, and we will be together in North Carolina for Diana's graduation in a few months. We can even fly there together if you want. She smiled at me, looking hopeful. I would like that, Brad. Thanks to Terry's help, I looked at apartments in downtown St. Louis and found one in about a week. It felt good to have enough money. I could choose what I liked without thinking too much about the cost. The apartment I chose was very different from our old home. It was on the 28th floor, new and bright, with large windows letting in a lot of light. There were 3 bedrooms. I planned to use one as a study and another as a guest room for Diana. The main bedroom was big enough for a king-sized bed with a huge walk-in closet. The bathroom had a big tub for relaxation. The kitchen was modern and nice, even though I didn't cook much. Plus, it was only a 6-minute walk to my office. It felt just right, and since I didn't want to see my old bedroom again, having this new place made me feel good. I went back to the house a few times to pack my things, and Jenny helped me. I told her about the apartment, but we didn't talk too much after that. She seemed to be doing well, getting back to her work in real estate. One thing I felt I had to do was check in on Jenny, and I wasn't comfortable just letting it go. I called Sam Abbott, a detective I had used before for a tricky situation with an employee. Sam's team had done a good job, and I felt I could trust him. We met for lunch at a diner, and I explained that I wanted him to keep an eye on my wife. I'm sad to say we're separated now, and she promised me she wouldn't see any other men for a year. He raised his eyebrows at me. I want her watched, but not all the time. Maybe 2 weeks out of each month at first, and it needs to be very secret. I do not want her to know she's being watched. If your people lose track of her while looking, that's better than her finding out. All right. He said, what do you need exactly? I want photos and video of her with any men. If she isn't with anyone, then a weekly message to me at my apartment. I gave him the number, and I'd like the phone at our house tapped, unless that's against the law. Technically, you're still the owner of the house, right, Brad? I nodded. Then it's completely okay. We set a time for his workers to come to my house to install the tap while Jenny was at work. I thanked him for his help. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, Brad. Things will get better. I threw myself into my work to keep my mind off Jenny. And before I knew it, spring was here. Jenny and I talked on the phone about once a week, and we had met for lunch a couple of times. The awkwardness we felt in January had faded quite a bit, and it seemed like we both enjoyed being together. We avoided any tough topics and happily shared stories about our daughter. Diana was set to graduate in a couple of months and had a great job lined up. In March, I went on my first date in 28 years with someone other than Jenny. I got to know Kate while working for a hotel chain in St. Louis. She was the purchasing manager there. A few months later, I ran into Kate at a charity event I went to every year. Kate was a lovely brunette about 35 years, old, tall, and eye-catching with dark eyes. She was also single and liked me. We danced a lot at the event, and a few days later I called her to ask her out for dinner. During dinner, we shared our stories. Kate had a tough upbringing and moved away for college. Because of her parents' bad marriage, she had been careful about getting married herself. She had a few serious relationships, but chose to focus more on her work. I gave her a brief overview of my life, telling her that my wife and I were separated, but still talking, and that we might get back together. Just not soon. So I may not be the best date, I said. But if you're not looking for marriage, this could work out. Thank you, Brad. I could tell you were honest during our work talks, and you've been open with me now, too. I like you, and I'm attracted to you, she said. But it sounds like we should take things slowly for a bit, though I hope we can have another date soon. I laughed and told her that sounded good to me. As May came closer, I talked with Jenny about plans for a trip, and then booked tickets for us to North Carolina with 2 hotel rooms. We had a wonderful weekend, enjoying time together while focusing on Diana. Since the weekend was all about her, there wasn't any pressure on Jenny and me to feel anything other than love and pride for our daughter. Diana was in her element. It made us happy to see that she was proud of us as she introduced us to all her friends, her golf teammates, her coach, her major advisor, and several of her good pals. When commencement day arrived, both Jenny and I had happy tears as we watched our little girl walk proudly across the stage to get her diploma. Unfortunately, just 2 weeks later, our 25th wedding anniversary passed without a word between us. I didn't want to bring it up with Jenny, nor did I feel like being around anyone at all. I spent the day alone, driving through the countryside for a while, and then came back to the apartment to watch bad movies on TV. It was far from the joyful anniversary I had hoped for. About 3 weeks later, in early June, I received a call from Sam Abbott that I didn't want to get. He had been calling me regularly with updates, saying that Jenny had not been with any men and that the phone tap hadn't picked up anything strange. This time he said, "Brad, I'm sorry to tell you, this, but Jenny had a long lunch last week with a tall guy, maybe a bit younger than she is, early 40s, I think. They ate at an outdoor cafe downtown and stayed there for a long time. It didn't seem romantic, though. Also, earlier this week, she had a couple of phone calls with a guy named Art, who said he was coming to St. Louis for a work meeting. They clearly know each other well. Is the guy dark-haired, a bit chubby, and wearing horn-rimmed glasses? Sam said yes, and I felt relieved. I'm sorry, Sam. I should have told you. That's Jenny's brother. He's visiting for a few days. Jenny called to tell me, and I should have let you know. No problem, Sam replied. I'm just glad it's nothing serious. It would be great if all the money you're paying me ends up being for nothing. Me too, Sam, really. When Jenny and I met for lunch the next week, I felt different inside. The news about the man who turned out to be her brother had relaxed me a bit. I was less worried that she would see someone new. After all, it had been 6 months. Whether she noticed the change in me or not, we had a really nice time. After lunch, I suggested we take a drive along the river before heading back to work, and she happily agreed. We didn't talk much, just enjoyed the warm air and sunshine. A few times I wanted to say something nice about our situation, but I held back. Instead, I stole glances at her, amazed by her beauty. I knew her well, but sometimes looking at her felt exciting. When I drove Jenny back to her office, she paused before getting out of the car. Brad, I haven't asked you about this, but it worries me all the time. Are you seeing anyone? I wanted to choose my words carefully. Yes, Jenny, I have been dating someone, but it's not serious. She looked down at her hands. Do you think it will happen? I thought for a moment before I replied. It might, Jenny, but even if it does, I still love you a lot. I promise to stay with you this year. She sat quietly, still not looking at me. Finally, she replied, Okay, Brad, that's fair. I just hate the idea of you. Then she shook her head. No, forget that, she said. I know what we agreed on. Thanks for answering my questions. I leaned over to kiss her cheek. To my surprise, she wrapped her arms around me and hugged me, tightly, almost like she needed it. When she let go, she gave a brave smile and got out of the car, walking quickly up the path to her office. Maybe it was that hug that made me act differently the following week. Kate and I were going out for dinner again our 5th or 6th time together. A couple of our dates had moments where we felt close, but we hadn't gone further. This time, Kate looked at me and said, I'd really like it if you came inside for a bit, Brad. I hadn't pushed for this moment, but I had been looking forward to it. Kate was beautiful and exciting. I hadn't been with anyone in over 6 months, so why was I hesitating? But I did hesitate. I froze for a second, and Kate noticed right away. She gave a small smile and said playfully, Brad, what's going on? I replied, feeling a bit embarrassed. I've been waiting for that invitation, but I think we shouldn't. I still feel close to my wife, and you deserve more than just part of me. She smiled at me, I want you, and I think we could be great together. But honestly, I worry that if we took that step, it might lead to something I'm not ready for. I have to admit, now that we're being smart, I feel a bit let down. You are so wonderful. She smiled and got out of the car. She came around to my side and said, Let's keep this as a rein. Check then. I can't hope you and your wife don't stay together. That wouldn't be kind. But if that doesn't work out, you better call me first. I laughed, thanked her for being nice, and promised that I would. We decided it was best to stop seeing each other for now. By the end of summer, I felt restless. Work didn't interest me and nothing else did either. Even golf was less fun than before. My meetings with Jenny happened more often and felt easier. We could enjoy each other's company without worrying too much about our situation. But I started to see how much I missed her. One day my friend Terry came into my office and said, All right, boss, I'm taking you out to lunch. Let's go. As we ate, she asked, What's wrong, Brad? You seem distracted lately. I'm not really sure, Terry. Nothing seems fun anymore. It seems like January will take forever to get here. Are you talking about the end of Jenny's year away? Who picked a full year? I started to understand what she meant and felt a bit silly. All right, I see it was me who said that so I could change it. But how can I be sure she'll stick to it until then? Come on, Brad, she said with a smile. You told me about Sam Abbott's reports. She's done everything she said she would for 8 months. You're the only one who doesn't see it. What do you mean? Terry smiled wider. Funny thing about the apartment you picked just for you. The big bedroom is beautiful, and the bathroom has a nice big tub for 2 people. It's close to your office and Jenny's place. You knew you would both be living there. So what are you saying, Terry? You're smart. Figure it out. I called Jenny and asked her out for dinner on Friday, September 14th, making it sound casual. We went to a nice restaurant, enjoyed good food, and talked easily about work and how well Diana was doing in New York. After dessert, I asked Jenny if she wanted to see my apartment. She had never been there before and was excited to check it out. I showed her around and she liked the great view and the big bedroom and closet. Then I said, Jenny, I have a little surprise for you. I handed her a wrapped gift. Why don't you open this? Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she unwrapped it. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said, Really, Brad? I smiled and nodded, and she hugged me tightly. We had some champagne and enjoyed our time together, finally falling asleep. The next morning, we shared a lighthearted moment before getting up. Why don't we have some breakfast first? I suggested. Jenny got up, borrowed my robe from the closet, and went into the kitchen. I soon heard her moving around and smelled fresh coffee. After a few minutes, she called me to come eat. When I walked in, I stopped and smiled at what I saw. The kitchen table was nicely set for 2 with cloth napkins and everything. There was a platter of bacon and eggs, a plate of toast, a pitcher of orange juice, and a pot of coffee. And right in the middle, Jenny had placed the gift I gave her the night before. It was a wooden plaque with these words engraved, Brad and Jenny's calendar, January 4th, September 14, 1 year. Epilogue. We were standing in the living room of our house, surrounded by boxes, some full and some not, feeling a bit down. Jenny agreed right away when I suggested we sell the house and move in together at my apartment. The bedroom held bad memories for me, and I didn't want to sleep in it again. Plus, our daughter was grown, and it moved out. We both worked in the city and liked being near restaurants and fun places. So we sold our old place, and we're now finishing the last of the packing, sending some things to the apartment and others to a charity auction. Brad, Jenny said with a playful smile, there's someone I want you to meet. Not here, but tonight at the apartment. I didn't quite understand, but I knew I wasn't supposed to. I just nodded, and we kept packing. That evening, back at the apartment, we cleaned up after a long day, which led to a nice time together. It had been 5 months since we got back together, and our bond felt fresh. After dinner, as we got ready for bed, I said, Jenny, you wanted to introduce me to someone tonight, but first I want to share something I thought about today. Can I go first? She replied, Sure. So I carried on. It might sound a bit serious, but I think it's kind of funny. I noticed, and I'm sure you did too, that both the guys you were with were more than 15 years older than you. She looked a little shocked, as if I was going to scold her. I held her hand and smiled to comfort her, then continued. I actually find it a bit comforting, I said. There was an 18-year gap between the first and second. So if you promise to be loyal to me for 18 more years, by then your next boyfriend will have to be 80. I think I can handle any old men trying to come around you. Jenny laughed, feeling relieved, knowing I was just trying to be funny, not upset. Brad, what if I promised to be loyal for 18 years and then another 18 after that? Then I'd be 83 and my boyfriend would need to be 98. I chuckled at the thought and said, Okay, but in return, I want a chance to date a 95-year-old too. We shared a warm moment together, and after a minute I asked, So who is this person I need to meet? Jenny's face had a cheeky look. You can't really meet him unless you're ready, Brad, so I guess I need to help you get ready. She went to the closet and soon I heard a soft buzzing sound. When she came back to the bed, she said, Brad, meet Brad, and placed a strange item in my hands that looked like a fun gift. Brad, I said, surprised. You couldn't think of a different name for him? Jenny laughed and said, I chose that name because he stands in for you silly. She explained how she found the item and the story behind it. She said she had missed our connection very much. I realized from the first day we talked that I would have a year without a man and the only one I wanted was you. I hope you don't feel like I betrayed you, she said with a playful smile. I thought having someone else would be better than having no one at all. And it was, she added, sharing how she felt and how happy she was with our friendship.